The purpose of this recording is just to give you an insight into my Birdmen book, which was published by Bluecoat Press in July 2018 this year. It's an accumulation of many years of work on and off photographing the pigeon community around the UK. It's all on black and white, negative. Majority of it is on Kodak Tri-X or T-Max 400, and the percentage is on HP5. I was experimenting a bit, but HP5, Tri-X, T-Max are just 400. You just can't beat them three films. They're just superior against any other black and white film. So that's my view. What I wanted to do was give you a little insight into where you can buy the book. And I wanted to give you my top 10, my favourite 10 pictures from the series at the minute, because they change and evolve all the time. So what I'll do, I will show you where you can buy the book, and you can get it on Bluecoat Press, and that's bluecoatpress.co.uk. I will leave a link in the comments and the information box below. Here's some pictures in that from the book, and this is the cover. If you go into my portfolio, you get Birdmen there. I've got a selection of pictures here from Birdmen. Oops. And if you go to books, I'll leave a link for my website as well. And let's just play this. So I'll go on to Vimeo. And this is the photo bookstore. You can buy the book from there. And this gives you a really, I love the way they do these videos. This gives you an insight into the book itself. And you can see what you're going to buy. And there's stories by Rod Adams as well. So there's first part of the book's made of stories from an amazing gentleman who I worked with for years in the pigeon community, and he had some of the most amazing tales, and he was an authority on fixing birds. He used to mend everybody's birds. He was like he used to work at Newcastle University, and people would come from all over the country and get him to fix their birds and mend them and operate on them and stuff. He was amazing. Anyway, he's called Rod Adams. So that's this stuff here is his text in the book. Some great funny anecdotes and stuff like that. So this is my top 10. I will try to give you a little insight into each picture. So number 1, this is a guy called George, if I remember. This is one of the first photographs I shot. I was fascinated by the time the men spent on their allotment site or their loft site, and they would have they had these little sheds, and everything was in these sheds, from cookers to pigeon feed to newspapers. It was just like a home from home, and heaters and things like that. And some had TVs, and they used to spend so much time in there, and then they used to watch the birds and observe the birds. And I wanted to capture something which you could get what he was doing in there. And this was one of my first real shots where I was like, yeah, wow, I've got it. And I was watching him for ages, and I was just standing out there like an idiot, and I was waiting and waiting for the birds to sort of fly past, because they sort of loop the loop all the time, so you have to wait. It's like a sequence, and then they break the sequence after a couple of minutes and then move to another place. So it was a matter of just waiting and sussing out where they were going to go next, and hoping he was standing or sitting in the same place. So luckily he was looking off there, and I just got a lovely arc with the birds in the background there, and it just sort of worked right. And I played with a few different depth of field techniques with it, and I think I got it. I think I nailed it. I didn't bleach out too much on the whites, and I got the depth with the reflection and his thought and train of thought and his line of eyes, and with the birds, his birds training, as they call it, flying in the sky. And that's in Newcastle. Sadly, I think George died not long after I shot this. I think he was very ill when I photographed him. Number 2, is Jimmy is Cooper in Bolden Colliery, and Jimmy was a great help to me in the Birdmen process, and he had a loft right near where I grew up, so it was great going back to the area, and I used to just hang out in his loft, and half the time I was just drinking tea and messing around or having a can of lager. And he had his caravan here, and then he had a swing, and he had the dogs, and then you can't see here, but there's like a load of sheds, and he had like wood stove burners in there. It was like his penthouse, and he had a garden, a allotment garden where he was growing food, and a lot of the boys up in the north do that. They grow their own food. So he just messed about. Anything I got him to do, I would just say, "Oh, go and have a swing on the swing," and he just did. He was just great fun. He always kept me amused, and he understood what I was trying to do, and and I just sort of wanted a picture to sort of sum up his character. And he had his little dog, which was always with him, but he just had. I wanted something to sum up his character. I have to admit, I have loads which sum up his character, and this is my favourite of him messing around like a kid, because he was still a big kid on the slide. And they use the caravan when they do the international races. So they sleep. There's a few of them. They sleep in the caravan. They wait all night for the birds. It's obsessional. 3. I got this shot thanks to the Purver brothers in Newham. The Purver brothers are Sikh brothers, and they have a pet food shop in Newham. And every Sunday, they cook a curry, and they do it out in the kitchen and the back. And all the pigeon boys from all over the East End come on a Sunday and have a curry. It's also a place where they register the birds and meet, and it's a sort of gathering point, or it was when I was doing it, and this is about 15 years ago. And I don't know if the chap is alive who I photographed on this, and if there's any way I can reach out to his family, if they want a picture of this, I'll very happily send it to them. He was quite an old chap at the time. But anyway, I was on my usual Sunday jaunt at the Purver Brothers pet food shop, and I was sitting on the table. I was waiting for my chicken curry to come. And this gentleman walked in, and I'm always looking for characters, and I just spotted his hands with all these rings on. I think they're signet rings. I'm not an authority with rings. Anyway, so he walks in, and I'm like, wow. And I knew at the minute, I knew the minute I saw his hands, I had to photograph them. But then I asked him, "Are you a pigeon man?" He was like, "Yeah." And he also bred canaries as well. And I just thought, right. And he lived in Dagenham, and he arranged to meet me a couple of times, and then couldn't do it. And I was getting desperate to meet him, because I really knew I had a shot with him. And eventually I got the call, and he said, "Come up." And I just raced up on a Friday or something to see him, and I spent an hour with him at his house. And I got some other bits and bobs, and I got him in his loft, and I got him, and I looked at his canaries and stuff like that. And then there's a sequence of shots and the contact sheets of this, and there's about 5 shots where you can see I'm built up to the shot. And I got that shot, and I got the bird looking a couple of ways purely by fluke, and that was the one that worked. And his hands, why it's special to me, his hands remind me of my granddad's hands and my granddad's watch. And there was just something, I felt a connection there with the hands. I didn't even look at the rings really, but I knew they were an integral part of the shot, and obviously the bird. This is a shot in Shildon Colliery, and these polytunnels are quite a sort of common within the Birdmen community, up in the northeast especially. A lot of them, as I said, like with Jimmy Cooper, they grow their own food. And this guy, you can see his onions were hanging up in the back, and he had this polytunnel next to his loft. And it was a beautiful night, the sort of sun, a beautiful sort of end of the day. The sun was sort of dropping behind the polytunnel, and I asked him if he would go into the polytunnel, because I could see there was a sort of silhouette sort of situation happening, and you can see up the top right he had these birds flying. So he walked into polytunnel, and the pose he has is not my setup. what I learned very quickly is when you put yourself with a camera in front of a Birdman, and they've got a bird in hand, they almost offer the bird to you to photograph. And that was the sort of pose he took up immediately, and it's a very common strike. And so I just let him do it, and I got a sort of a definition of a man there. And then I kept shouting at him. I said, just stay there, because I knew these birds were going to fly over. And I got a few shots where the birds flew. And I remember thinking, I think I come nearly to the end of the roll, and I remember the one shot where I thought, I've got at least 3 of the birds in. And I didn't realise until I actually looked at the contact sheet, there was one frame where I just got all 4 birds. It's a pure fluke. I did sort of go for it. I didn't expect the light to be as beautiful as that. I did set up this little bit by getting him into his polytunnel, but he spent most of his time in the polytunnel anyway. And it just I just wanted to show this aspect of it somehow within the relationship with the pigeon lads, and do something a bit different. Anyway, so that's Shildon, I think. 5. I think it's a place called Curados in Birkenhead. I may have the pronunciation wrong. So you're always looking for different ways to shoot these guys on their lofts, because when you've been to as many as I have, they all look the same, and it's a very challenging situation. You drive 100, 300, 200 miles and you turn up in somebody's back garden and they've got a shed full of pigeons and some corrugated fencing, and they're like, right, what do you want to do? And you've got to act quick. And I'm quite an experienced photographer with my work anyway, so I do act quite quickly in situations when I'm faced with taking a picture, and like all my peers do. They all understand how to turn a picture out. But this is film and I can't actually see what I'm doing, but I sort of, when I get to a place, I always check it out, and that's through my work. I always check the surroundings out. I'm always looking for a different take on it. And I remember I was trying to do a series of shots from inside out, and there was I was sort of looking for ways to sort of photograph it differently. And his loft was in a square compound, and in the middle here, like down here, was where his little green is, and I think he had some veg or something in there. I may be wrong, but he was in a square area. So I went into the opposite loft, as you can see, and immediately it felt like a triptych. Immediately I could see with the windows there was a sort of 3 element area to it, even though it looks predominantly more like a diptych there. But even though the proportions are not correct on the right side, I could see there's some sort of triptych forming. So I told him to get his birds out, let his birds going, and there are his birds flying around. And what they do is, I said previously, they fly in a sort of swarm formation, but they circle, or they figure of 8 round, so they're moving around the area but not going too far, but they'll always come back over the lofts at some point. One, because they might want to pop in for some food. They know it's their safe place, but they do stick together, and I like that. And I shouted of this chap to stay in the middle here, and luckily there was a bit of a rogue bird. There was a bird which didn't want to leave, and I just thought, this is a great opportunity. So what I said to him, I said, just interact with the bird and don't scare it, but just let the other birds come round. And I could see, and I just exposed it for outside, so that would mean that everything inside was blackened off and dark. And I could see this shot in the frame, and I just snapped away at it and snapped away. And it's one of them sort of moments where everything comes together. The birds flew over. He was looking up, and he put his hands over his eyes, which sort of gives you the idea that he's looking up to the bird here. And this little rogue bird was just sitting there looking at him going, I'm not going anywhere. So I love this shot. It was a very difficult shot to shoot. And it's you've got to try. It looks simple shot, but it's not. It's something I worked at and worked at and worked at to try and perfect a different way of depicting these little compounds and lofts. And so it was quite challenging. I used to leave these places exhausted because I was trying to do something a little bit different. Number 6. This is either in Ashington or Newbiggin. It was very cold. I think it was snowing. The light was white. The air was sharp. And a lot of my pictures, if you look at them, sum up the sort of loneliness of the sport. And I think for me, this shot summed up that loneliness. And he was in there. He was sort of tending to his birds in there. And I was just watching him. And the light was really, really strong. And it was piercing the light. And I just got him because he had the mask, which I wanted to show as well, because a lot of the guys, in many of the older guys now have what they call, I think, pigeon lung. So, and that's where the bird's wing flaps, there's like a plume comes off it. And that eventually will affect your lungs. And so a lot of the boys with the sawdust and the poo and the plume, they wear masks, which rightly so. And I wanted to get that, and I didn't want to be too contrived over getting it. And it's just an opportunity, and I wanted to capture the loneliness. I wanted to capture the light and that solitude and the mask and just that thought process. And I think there's no order of 1 to 10 in what I like best in the shot, but I think of all the shots I've shot in my life, this is one of the shots which I like. It's in my all-time top 10 because it just sums up me a little bit, and I just got all the elements right. The eyes are all in. There's a sort of busyness, but there's a solitude there, and there's a moment, and there's a sort of forward-thinking look as well. I just love it. Number 7. So this is near, is in Ashington, Newbiggin area, up in the Northumberland area. And what I noticed through the day as I was sitting in this guy's compound was there was just horses walking by all the time. It was just bizarre. So his door was open, so I just started trying to get the shots. I could hear them coming down. I was just waiting. In the book, what I did was I did like a sort of diptych on 2 pages where there's this shot here of the horse. I just like the surreal quality of it. I just find it weird. It's a sight which you don't associate with pigeon men, but there's a big part. There's a lot of horses up in Ashington and around the country in pigeon lofts and stuff like that. There's people have horses next to it and stuff like that. And I like that surreal aspect. But the next shot on the right was where the rider, I managed to sort of shoot that, and then there was the guy who was walking it on a long rein. So I shot this shot here, and then as the horse moved, I just waited, and then luckily I got the guy who was trailing behind it, the rider or whatever it was, but he was walking, and I shot that. And I just thought it would make a nice sort of diptych, 2 shots together in the book. So I like it because it was spontaneous. It happened really quickly. I was aware of it. I was switched on to the horses. I was switched on to different things going on outside. And I sort of I just like the randomness of it. 8. This is in Selby. I think this was one of the last ever pigeon liberations by the Up North Combine in Selby, or it was supposedly supposed to be. I don't know if it's since changed, but the Up North Combine I worked with quite a bit. I would follow them out to sort of northern France, and I think there's one shot in Lillers of a liberation. It's a shot of the liberation of the trucks and the tree. There's one tree in this field, and you can see the sort of silhouette of the birds going out and the tree. I wanted to get a shot which showed the men actively on the trucks. I've got a few shots of the liberation, and I've got hundreds of shots, but I've only sort of put a couple in the book. And this gent on the right here was sort of with me. I'd slept all night on the airfield. It's on this airfield, and I slept all night in my little Golf driver I had, and this guy, I think, turned up really early, and we're just walking about. I have no idea who he is. He's a nice guy, and he was sort of with me, and I was walking around, and I knew the boys on the rig there, on the back of the truck, and they're still working for the up north to this day, and so I was comfortable with them. They knew what I was doing. They knew me like inside out. So I could do anything I want with these guys around. So I just said to them, when you're up there, don't come down too quickly, because what they do is they literally unhinge the birds on either side, and then the birds come out, and they're opening all the flaps. And the birds had gone out, but they are lingering and just checking to see if there's any birds like still in the truck, just to make sure the birds are out. And I just says, just linger there for a couple of seconds. And I wanted to make the shot look busy. I wanted to show the people. People are such an important part of this. And when you go to these liberations, there's 22,000 birds being liberated, and the birds take up the sort of scope of the shot. But on many a time, but I really wanted to get a feeling of the people. And I thought, well, to get 4 people in would be quite an amazing achievement. Anyway, so I wanted to get the boss, who's in the middle there, checking to see everything's gone out. So everything has just gone out. He's making sure, he's just signalled to the UK mainland, everywhere in his little contacts, to say the birds are gone, get yourselves ready. So I wanted to show his sort of authority, watching the 2 boys working, and then the spectator, who was a pigeon man as well, looking at the pigeons. This shot is it's such a special shot to me. And Tony Lewis, the guy in the seat with the air mask on, he really opened up and let me into his life a little bit, and I really respected him for that. And he was very ill at the time, and I have to admit, I'm not sure if he's still with us. And again, if Tony's family are around, I'd love to give him a picture of this. It's a beautiful reminder of Tony. He was pretty ill with, I'm not sure, and I wouldn't want to say, but he had some sort of accident, and he was in oxygen mask a lot of the time. The guy in the window was his helper. He was a guy who helped Tony, because Tony was quite an established pigeon man. So Tony he couldn't get out as much. He did get out, but when they were doing the birds, what happened was that his lofts were on his home in his back garden. And this guy would help him choose the birds and get them ready to go out, to put in a basket, to send in a truck to be liberated like the previous shot. And Tony would, the guy here was just showing him the birds, and I was shooting in the living room. And this took 2 rolls of film. It took 60 odd shots. And it was just a really difficult shot to get because of the lighting. Luckily, black and white can really handle it, and black and white's got such a good latitude for the shadows and the highlights. But one thing what we really wanted to get right, what I really wanted to get right was the cross here. So if you look at the window, and you've got this cross, and I wanted, because this guy for me was like his guardian angel in a way, I could see there was something almost like iconic, like a sort of religious aspect to the shot here. And then with the wings, and then with Tony's illness, and then he looked almost sort of angelic. And it just sort of said it. I could see the shot, but I wasn't sure if I was going to get it. I wasn't sure if I was going to get these elements right. And at first I was waiting for the birds to be chosen. They were coming through. Tony was having a look at them. They were being put back and put in the basket. So I really had to play the shot. And Tony was like, I couldn't really use Tony that much because he was getting exhausted. So it was one of them. I knew I had to get it. I knew with the light was pretty special outside. It was coming together, and it was just almost a sort of like, I don't like saying religious, but if you were there, it was almost coming together of everything element, you know. So with the link between Tony, the Birds, and this guy, and the fact that they're working together. It's teamwork, and it meant a lot to me, this shot. 10. This is in Essex and Chelmsford. 10. Horden Colliery. I could have chosen a few shots to illustrate why I wanted to show this shot, but this was something like 2020 or 2. It was 2000 and maybe 5 or something like that. In fact, it was probably 2007, something like that, this shot. But it was in the social club where the boys went and got themselves ready for the race. They put their birds up, pick their birds like you saw Tony doing. They put them in a basket, they send them to the truck, and they go. And when I was shooting it, they register the time in these little boxes here. And this was an analog one. You can get digital ones and stuff, and it's changed a bit now, but these were all set at like something like 5 o'clock on a Friday when the birds went out. So everybody was going from the same time. So when the birds came back, you grabbed your bird, you put the ring into one of these boxes or registered it, and the time would be set for its return. Easier said than done. It's quite a complicated process, but it's like not only that, but the shot just with a flat cap, and it just, for me, it was something like it could have been shot in the 1950s, and I could see it. I could see this chap just looking, and the makeup and the interior makeup of the club back room, and the tiles and the light coming through, and even though there's a telephone box right near the window, it doesn't look like a telephone box, and the shelving and stuff, and just with his clothing, I just looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, that's like, it looks like the 1950s or something. There's only another one. There is another giveaway in the shot, is the colour gas bottle on the bottom right there. So, but that could be sort of 60s as well. But I just thought there was a time, an essence of time in this, and I loved it because it sort of showed a sort of image which you could question, when was it shot? And I liked that, and it wasn't sort of a negative. I wasn't trying to be negative with it. I was just I was just intrigued by the fact that in front of me, I questioned the whether or not it was, am I looking at something in the 21st century? Anyway, I hope that makes sense. So there's the link. There's the website. If you want to have a look and buy the book, please do. Be a great Christmas present. Also, check out Bluecoat Press. I'm going to do a little insight into Bluecoat Press this week and give everybody on camera a little view of what they've got on offer as well. So I'll put everything down in the information box. Thank you for listening.